History hides whispers of journeys through time itself. For centuries, people have reported incredible experiences that seem to defy the linear flow of our lives, from monks who claim to build a machine for viewing the past, to ordinary individuals who insist they briefly stepped into another era. We are about to dive deep into the most compelling and bizarre of these stories, separating potential fact from likely fiction. You will walk away knowing which of these legendary cases might hold a grain of truth and which are pure fantasy. We will uncover why a man with a passport from a country that never existed vanished from a guarded hotel room, and how an internet user from the early 2000s claimed to be a soldier from the future. Why do you think the idea of controlling time captivates us so completely? Among the most persistent legends of technological time travel is a story that sounds like it was pulled from a science fiction novel. It centers on a Benedictine monk named Father Ernetti, who claimed to have helped construct a machine capable of seeing into the past. He called this device the Chronovisor. According to Ernetti, it was not a physical time machine that transported a person, but rather a complex apparatus that could tune into the residual energy of past events, displaying them on a screen like a television broadcast from history. He described it as a large cabinet covered in dials and cathode ray tubes, a bizarre fusion of vintage electronics and metaphysical theory. His claims were nothing short of spectacular. Father Ernetti stated that he and his team had used the Chronovisor to witness some of history's most pivotal moments. He said he watched the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and even provided a photograph, a grainy image of a suffering man on the cross. He also claimed to have recovered the text of a lost Roman tragedy, Theists, by the playwright Aeneas, simply by watching its original performance in the ancient past. These were not just casual observations, they were direct challenges to our understanding of history and physics. The mystery deepens with the alleged pedigree of the inventors. Ernetti insisted he did not work alone. He named a team of 12 brilliant minds, including the renowned Nobel Prize-winning physicist Enrico Fermi. The involvement of such a celebrated scientist lent an air of credibility that captivated the public imagination. If a man of Fermi's stature was involved, how could it all be a fabrication? Yet, this is where the story begins to fray. There is no record, no correspondence, no diary entry from Enrico Fermi or any of the other alleged collaborators that confirms their participation in such a project. The entire narrative rests solely on the word of Father Ernetti, and then there is the evidence, or rather, the complete and total lack of it. No blueprints for the Chronovisor were ever found. The device itself was never produced. The photograph of Christ's crucifixion was later analyzed and determined to be a detail from a known wooden crucifix in a church near Rome. The text of the lost play Theists was dismissed by classicists as a clumsy forgery, its language inconsistent with the era it was supposed to represent. So we are left with a fundamental question. Was Father Ernetti a clever hoaxer, weaving a tale that mixed his scientific curiosity with his religious faith? Or did he genuinely believe he had accessed the past through some means, perhaps misinterpreting a spiritual vision as a technological achievement? The Chronovisor remains a quintessential mystery, a perfect storm of science, religion, and human longing that continues to echo through time. While the Chronovisor represents a deliberate quest to master time, other encounters with the past seem to happen entirely by accident. On a warm August day in 1901, two highly respected English women, Charlotte Anne Moberly and Elena Jourdain, took a stroll through the gardens of the Palace of Versailles. Both were academics, the principal and vice principal of a women's college, and they were not prone to flights of fancy. Yet their leisurely walk would transform into one of history's most detailed and debated time-slip accounts. As they searched for the Petit Trianon, the small palace beloved by Marie Antoinette, they found themselves disoriented. The landscape itself seemed to shift around them. The air grew still and heavy, the colors oddly muted. They described the foliage as flat and lifeless, like a painted backdrop, and the paths they followed felt unfamiliar and strangely arranged. This was not the bustling tourist spot they expected. It was an eerily silent and deserted place. Then they began to see people. A woman abruptly shook a white cloth out of a window. Two men in long, dark green coats and three-cornered hats, outfits that seemed plucked from the previous century, gave them directions with a stiff, formal air. They saw a rustic-looking woman sitting on the grass and a handsome, menacing man with a pockmarked face who leered at them from a kiosk. But the most striking figure was a lady sitting alone on a bench, sketching. She wore a light summer dress and a wide-brimmed white hat. As they passed, she looked up, and both Moberly and Jourdain were struck by her face. It was, they later became convinced, the face of Marie Antoinette herself, a face they recognized from famous portraits. The entire experience lasted only a short while, but the feeling of wrongness of having stepped into a place that was not their own was profound. Once they returned to the familiar part of the gardens, the strange atmosphere lifted instantly. They compared notes and were shocked to discover they had both experienced the same bizarre sensations and seen the same anachronistic figures. For years, they privately investigated the incident, visiting Versailles repeatedly to try and reconcile their memories with the modern layout. They even studied old maps and archives, concluding that the landscape and the clothing of the people they saw perfectly matched the estate as it existed in the 1780s during the Queen's time. So what truly happened to these two sensible women? Skeptics propose they simply succumbed to a powerful shared hallucination, a product of suggestion and their own romantic expectations of the location. Perhaps they overheard a conversation about the past and their educated minds filled in the rest with startling clarity. Others wonder if the intense emotional energy of the French Revolution, a time of immense trauma for Marie Antoinette, somehow left a psychic imprint on the location, a recording that the two visitors somehow tuned into. But the most tantalizing explanation, the one that fuels the legend, is that Moberly and Jourdain did not see a ghost or a vision. They briefly and entirely accidentally slipped through a crack in time, walking directly into the world of 1789. Their story endures not because of any machine or device, but because it suggests that the past might not be entirely locked away. It might, on rare occasions, simply bleed through. The quiet gardens of Versailles give way to the roaring traffic of mid-century New York City, and a story that feels ripped from the pages of a pulp magazine. In June of 1950, a man suddenly appeared in the middle of Times Square, causing immediate chaos and confusion. He was not just lost, he was utterly displaced. Witnesses described him as dressed in the formal, old-fashioned clothing of a 19th-century dandy, complete with a high starched collar, a long frock coat, and mutton-chop sideburns. His face was a mask of bewilderment as he stared at the towering buildings and speeding automobiles, seemingly unable to comprehend the world around him. Before anyone could approach him, he panicked, darted into the street, and was tragically struck and killed by a passing car. The investigation that followed only deepened the enigma. The man carried no identification, only a few peculiar items in his pockets. He had copper tokens for beer, a bill from a livery stable for the care of a horse and carriage, and a handful of old-fashioned banknotes. Most intriguingly, he held a letter postmarked from the year 1876, addressed to a man named Rudolph Fentz. The police, following this single lead, discovered something astonishing. According to city records, a Rudolph Fentz had indeed been reported missing in 1876. He was a young man of 29 who had stepped out for an evening stroll and never returned home. The case had remained open and unsolved for 74 years. This incredible tale, known as the Rudolph Fentz story, first appeared in a science fiction magazine in 1951. It was presented not as fiction but as a true, documented account, and it quickly captured the public imagination. It perfectly encapsulated the aesthetic of a time travel accident, the lone individual from a bygone era violently ejected into a future he could not possibly understand. Every detail, from his anachronistic clothing to the obsolete money in his pocket, seemed to support the impossible conclusion that he had somehow leaped across 8 decades in an instant. Yet the story is a powerful illusion. Decades after its publication, researchers traced the tale back to its true origin. It was not a real police report, but a work of short fiction written by a science fiction author named Jack Finney, who would later become famous for his novel The Body Snatchers. Finney had simply invented the entire scenario, crafting a perfect urban legend. The story had been so compelling, its details so vivid, that it was later reprinted and mistakenly presented as fact, creating a modern myth that persists to this day. So why does the Rudolph Fentz story continue to fascinate us even after its debunking? It is because it represents a pure and simple archetype, the perfect time-slip narrative. It strips away complex machines and psychic visions, leaving only the core image of a human being hopelessly out of time. The story resonates because it taps into a deep, universal anxiety, the fear of being suddenly unmoored from everything and everyone we know, of becoming a ghost in our own world. The polished fiction of Rudolph Fentz feels almost plausible next to a story that erupted in the digital age. In 2003, a wave of sensational news articles reported the arrest of a man named Andrew Carlssin. According to these tabloid accounts, Carlssin had accomplished the impossible. He had taken an initial investment of just $800 and over a mere 2 weeks turned it into a staggering $350 million through a series of 126 high-risk stock trades. Every single trade was a winner. This was not just incredible luck, it was a statistical anomaly so vast it defied all known market logic. When the Securities and Exchange Commission finally detained him, the story goes, he offered an explanation that was even more unbelievable than his profits. He claimed to be a time traveler from the year 2256. He said he was just an ordinary guy from the future who had come back to make some easy money, having memorized a few key market crashes and recoveries from the history books of his own time. He even allegedly offered to reveal the location of Osama bin Laden in exchange for a lenient sentence. The story was a perfect cocktail of 21st century anxieties, tapping directly into our fears about an unfair financial system and the power of hidden knowledge. It suggested that the ultimate insider tip does not come from a corporate leak, but from the history books of tomorrow. Yet, when you pull back the curtain, the entire narrative collapses. There are no credible police reports, no Securities and Exchange Commission filings, no court records, and no independent journalistic investigations that confirm Andrew Carlssin ever existed. The story was entirely fabricated by a satirical news website called The Weekly World News, a publication famous for its outlandish and fictional stories about Bat-Boy and alien encounters. They had simply invented the character and the entire scenario, but the tale took on a life of its own, spreading across the nascent internet, forwarded in emails and discussed in online forums as if it were a genuine mystery. Its persistence reveals something crucial about our relationship with time travel legends. In the past, stories like the Chronovisor revolved around witnessing sacred history, while the Moberly and Jourdain account was rooted in a romantic connection to the past. The Andrew Carlssin myth, however, is purely a creature of modern capitalism. It reflects a world obsessed with wealth, instant success, and the suspicion that someone, somewhere, has a cheat code for the system. The time traveler is no longer a monk or a tourist, he is a day trader from the future. This evolution shows how these legends are not static. They shape themselves to our deepest contemporary fears and desires, holding up a mirror to what we truly value and what we feel is just out of our reach. From the digital stock markets to the high seas of World War II, we find a story where the line between military science and science fiction blurs into a terrifying legend. The tale of the Philadelphia experiment is a cornerstone of modern conspiracy theory, a narrative so potent it has endured for decades. It allegedly took place in the autumn of 1943 at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The United States Navy was supposedly testing a revolutionary new technology, not a new weapon, but a form of electronic camouflage. The goal was to render a warship, the USS Eldridge, completely invisible to enemy radar and even to the naked eye. The theory was based on the work of Albert Einstein, specifically his unified field theory, which attempted to link electromagnetism and gravity. The story goes that the scientists generated an enormous electromagnetic field around the ship. When they activated the equipment, something far stranger and more horrifying than mere invisibility occurred. Witnesses reported a thick green fog enveloping the Eldridge. The ship itself began to glow with an unearthly light. Then, in an instant, it vanished from the Philadelphia harbor, only to reappear moments later at the naval base in Norfolk, Virginia, hundreds of miles away, before instantly teleporting back. It was not just teleportation. Some accounts insist the ship had briefly traveled through time. The human cost, however, was the most chilling part of the story. Sailors aboard the Eldridge paid a terrible price. They were said to have suffered catastrophic physical and psychological effects. Some crew members were reportedly fused alive with the metal structure of the ship itself, their bodies merging horrifically with the steel decks and bulkheads. Others were said to have burst into flames or simply vanished, never to be seen again. Those who survived were allegedly driven insane, plagued by intense nausea and disorientation, or they would periodically fade in and out of visibility, becoming living ghosts. This entire incredible saga was popularized by a man named Carl Meredith Allen, who used the pseudonym Carlos Allende. He began sending handwritten letters to a writer and astronomer named Morris K. Jessup, claiming to have witnessed the event firsthand from a nearby merchant ship. Allende's accounts were detailed, chaotic, and filled with technical-sounding jargon, but he could never produce any verifiable evidence, and his story changed frequently. The United States Navy has consistently and flatly denied that any such experiment ever took place. They state that the claims are completely false and point out that the USS Eldridge's own deck logs place it nowhere near Philadelphia on the date in question. So how did such a detailed and gruesome story take such a powerful hold on the public imagination? The answer lies in the potent combination of real-world research and the fertile ground of wartime secrecy. In the 1940s, the Navy was indeed conducting research on degaussing, a process that uses electrical currents to reduce a ship's magnetic signature to protect it from magnetic mines. This was a genuine, if misunderstood, piece of science that could have been misinterpreted as an invisibility project. Furthermore, the chaos and absolute secrecy surrounding military projects during World War II created an environment ripe for speculation. When a government operates behind a thick veil of classified information, it becomes easy for people to believe that anything, no matter how unbelievable, might be hidden behind it. The Philadelphia experiment is less a historical account and more a cultural Rorschach test. It reflects our deep-seated fears about the unintended consequences of powerful technology, the callousness of military authority, and the terrifying idea that in the quest for a new weapon, science could unravel the very fabric of reality, with human beings as its first tragic casualties. While the Philadelphia experiment thrived on military secrecy, a new kind of time traveler emerged from a different kind of shadow, the early Internet forum. In the year 2000, a user named Time Travel Zero began posting on a public discussion board. He would soon become known to the world as John Titor, the Internet's first and most famous self-proclaimed time traveler. Unlike the accidental tourists of Versailles or the unfortunate Rudolph Fentz, Titor presented himself as a deliberate operative. He claimed to be an American soldier from the year 2036, on a mission to our time to retrieve a specific IBM 5110 computer, a machine he said was critical for debugging legacy code in his own war-torn era. His story was not a brief anecdote, it was a sprawling narrative delivered over months of detailed, patient posts. He described a world shattered by a second American Civil War, a conflict that would begin, he said, in 2004 over disputes about the presidential election and escalate into a nuclear World War III by 2015. He spoke of his time machine, a device housed in a 1967 Chevrolet Corvette, powered by 2 singularity reactors and a gravity distortion unit that manipulated micro-singularities or miniature black holes to warp spacetime. His technical explanations were a convincing blend of real physics concepts and pure science fiction, enough to intrigue the technologically savvy audience of the early web. For a moment it felt plausible. He made a number of specific, testable predictions about our immediate future. He claimed scientists would confirm the existence of miniature black holes at the CERN laboratory by 2004, a prediction that did not come to pass. He said the United States government would round up millions of citizens into quarantine camps during a mad cow disease outbreak, something that never occurred. His most famous failed forecast was his detailed timeline for a civil war that, thankfully, remains in the realm of fiction. Yet, amidst these dramatic misses, a few of his more general observations struck a nerve. He predicted a growing cultural and political divide in the United States, a sentiment that resonates deeply today. He suggested that people would become increasingly distrustful of centralized authority and large institutions, a trend that has only accelerated in the age of social media. So why does the legend of John Titor persist long after his most specific prophecies failed? It is not because he was a genuine prophet, but because he was a perfect mirror for the anxieties of his time. He appeared just after the Y2K scare, when people were newly aware of how fragile our digital infrastructure could be. His story tapped into nascent fears of societal collapse, political polarization, and global pandemics long before they became mainstream concerns. He was not a traveler from the future so much as a collective nightmare from the early 21st century, given a voice and a name. His legacy is a testament to the power of storytelling in the digital age, proving that the most compelling time travel claims are not those that predict the future with perfect accuracy, but those that articulate our deepest, most unspoken fears about the path we are already on. The digital ghost of John Titor still haunts our forums, but another traveler's story is etched into the very geography of our world. In the 1950s, a man stepped off a plane at Haneda Airport in Tokyo, presenting a passport that should not have existed. He was well-dressed, professional, and carried himself with the confidence of a seasoned businessman. His documents appeared perfectly in order, except for one impossible detail. His passport was issued by a European nation called Tord. When officials politely informed him that no such country was on any map, the man grew frustrated and insistent. He produced a driver's license from Tord and checks from a Tord bank account. He argued that his country had existed for 1,000 years, a sovereign state nestled squarely in the mountainous border region between France and Spain, a place we know as the Principality of Andorra. To him, this was a simple fact, as real as the ground beneath his feet. The authorities, utterly baffled, detained him in a nearby hotel room while they investigated. They placed guards at his door and secured the window several stories above the street. When they returned the next morning, the man was gone. He had vanished from a locked room without a trace, leaving all his personal belongings behind. No one ever saw him again. This story of the man from Tord has all the hallmarks of a classic urban legend, a tale passed down and embellished over decades. There is no official police report, no contemporary news article, no record of the event in airport logs. It is a ghost story, but one that resonates with a profound and unsettling idea. What if he was not a time traveler, but something else entirely? This is why the tale is so often folded into theories of parallel universes. Perhaps this man was not from our past or future, but from a reality almost identical to our own, a world where that small slice of Europe developed under a different name, a land called Tord. In his universe, his passport was perfectly valid. He simply took a wrong turn, stepping through a temporary gateway from his world into ours. Think of reality not as a single, straight road, but as a vast, branching highway system with countless lanes running side by side. Most of the time, we stay firmly in our own lane. But what if, just for a moment, a ramp appeared? The businessman from Tord might have accidentally merged onto our highway, only to find himself stranded in a world that was almost his, but critically, devastatingly different. His confusion was not an act. His country was real, just not here. His ultimate disappearance suggests that the doorway did not stay closed. Perhaps the ramp reappeared, allowing him to return home, or maybe some cosmic correction simply erased him from our timeline. The story endures because it is a perfect allegory for our own feelings of dislocation. Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you went in, or experienced a jarring sense that something is subtly wrong with a familiar place? The man from Tord is that feeling magnified to an existential nightmare. He is a reminder that the map of our world, which we trust so completely, might be just one version of the truth, and that the borders of reality itself may be far more porous than we dare to believe. The story of the man from Tord suggests entire worlds might exist just beyond our perception. But what if some corners of our own world are inherently thinner, more prone to these tears in reality? For decades, one particular city street in England has earned a reputation as a veritable hotspot for accidental time travel. The Bold Street area of Liverpool is not an ancient monument or a sacred site, but a bustling modern shopping district. Yet it has been the stage for a remarkable number of seemingly independent time-slip experiences, all reporting a startlingly similar journey into the past. In the 1990s, a woman named Carol was walking towards the large Waterstones bookshop, a familiar city landmark. As she stepped off the curb to cross the street, the entire atmosphere of the place transformed in an instant. The roar of modern traffic vanished, replaced by an eerie quiet. The cars parked along the curb were all older models, classics from the 1950s and 60s. The shop fronts themselves had changed. Where she expected to see the familiar bookstore entrance, there was instead a different shop entirely called Crips, which had not existed for decades. People on the sidewalk were dressed in post-war period clothing, and no one seemed to notice her or her own modern attire. The experience lasted only moments before the sound of a blaring car horn snapped her back to the present, the old Cars and Crips shop instantly replaced by the modern city she knew. Her story is far from unique. Another account from the 2000s involves a man named Frank who was walking down the same area when he suddenly found himself surrounded by cobblestones and tram lines, infrastructure that had been removed from the city long before he was born. He saw a horse-drawn cart and a woman in a full-length Edwardian dress before the vision dissolved as abruptly as it began. What makes the Bold Street phenomena so compelling is the sheer volume of these independent reports, all describing a sudden, uninvited shift into a specific bygone era of Liverpool's history. So what could possibly explain this concentration of temporal weirdness on a single city street? One intriguing theory points directly beneath the feet of those experiencing these slips. Liverpool is built upon a complex network of underground tunnels, sandstone quarries, and geological fault lines. Some researchers speculate that these subterranean features, particularly where different rock strata meet and create pressure, could generate unusual electromagnetic or gravitational energies. The idea is that these natural forces might, under the right conditions, momentarily warp the local fabric of space-time, creating a temporary window into the past. It is a concept that borrows from real physics, suggesting the ground itself might be unstable in ways we do not fully understand. A more psychological explanation proposes that these are not literal journeys through time, but powerful, collective hallucinations triggered by the location itself. Bold Street is a place steeped in history with old buildings and a strong sense of its own past. Perhaps certain cues in the environment, a particular smell, the angle of the light, or even infrasound, low-frequency sound inaudible to the human ear that can cause feelings of unease and visual disturbances prompt susceptible individuals to have a vivid, shared vision of the street as it once was. Their brains, picking up on subtle, unconscious cues, construct a fully immersive memory of a time they never actually lived in. Yet, for those who have lived through it, the experience feels far more real than any dream. The cold touch of the air, the specific details of the vintage cars, the palpable silence, these sensory details are what make the time slips of Bold Street so haunting. They challenge the very solidity of our world, suggesting that the past is not a sealed book but a layer of the city that is still present, still accessible, and sometimes, just for a heartbeat, breaks through to the surface. The unsettling possibility that our own recorded history might hold visual glitches brings us to one of the most debated pieces of footage in the world. During the premiere of Charlie Chaplin's silent film The Circus in 1928, a crowd scene captured an extraordinary figure. As Chaplin's tramp character performs his antics, the camera pans across the laughing audience. Among them, a woman walks briskly, holding a small, rectangular object flat against her ear and seemingly talking into it with an expression of casual concentration. To any modern viewer, her posture and the object's shape are unmistakable. She looks exactly like someone engrossed in a conversation on a mobile phone, an invention that would not exist for another half a century. When this clip resurfaced and went viral in the early 2000s, the internet seized upon it as definitive proof of a time traveler caught on camera. The evidence felt tangible, a ghost from the future immortalized in celluloid. How could this be anything other than an anachronism, a brief, unguarded moment where someone from our time was briefly visible in their own past? The simplicity of the image made the mystery so powerful. There was no complex machine, no government conspiracy, just a woman on a day out who appeared to be using technology from the wrong era. Skeptics, however, quickly offered more grounded explanations. The most plausible theory is that the woman was using a portable hearing aid, known at the time as an ear trumpet or an acoustic horn. By the late 1920s, smaller, tubular hearing devices that could be held to the ear did exist. If she was speaking, she could have been testing the device or simply muttering to herself in a crowded, noisy room. Another suggestion is that she was holding a small flask or a compact and speaking into it for a private joke, her gesture merely coincidentally mirroring our modern phone mannerisms. The human brain is wired to seek patterns, a trait known as pareidolia, where we see familiar shapes in random clouds or hear words in static noise. In this case, we are projecting a behavior we know intimately onto an ambiguous action from a different time. Yet, the hearing aid explanation is not a perfect fit. The object she holds appears remarkably slim and flat, unlike the bulkier, more funnel-shaped acoustic devices typically seen in that period. This small discrepancy is the very space where the legend thrives. It is the gap between what we can comfortably explain and what we secretly wish could be true. The clip went viral not because it was ironclad evidence, but because it perfectly encapsulated the aesthetic of a time slip. It was a short, silent, and eerily relatable moment that required no complex backstory. It was a mystery packaged for the digital age, something that could be shared, debated, and dissected in seconds. This single piece of film challenges our perception of a linear and secure past. It forces us to confront the idea that history, even when recorded, might not be entirely stable. The woman in the crowd remains an enigma, a silent question mark walking through a silent film. Her true story is likely mundane, a simple case of misunderstood technology, but the legend she inspired speaks to a deeper truth about our relationship with the past. We are not just observers of history, we are interpreters, and sometimes we cannot help but see our own reflections staring back at us from the most unexpected places. While the woman in Chaplin's film remains a silent mystery, another figure from that same era gave time travel its modern voice. H.G. Wells did not just write a story in 1895. He engineered a concept that would permanently rewire our collective imagination. His novel, The Time Machine, provided the very vocabulary we use to discuss the subject. He was the first to popularize the term itself, and he grounded his fantastical premise in the scientific thinking of his day. His protagonist, known only as the time traveler, does not stumble through a psychic crack or a magical portal. He constructs a machine, a deliberate vehicle built on a logical, if revolutionary, principle. He explains that time is simply a fourth dimension, a direction we can theoretically move through just as we move through length, breadth, and thickness. This was not mere hand-waving. It was a bold extrapolation from the cutting-edge geometry and physics of the Victorian age, giving the impossible a veneer of plausible science. But Wells understood that the true power of his story lay not in the machine's mechanics, but in the journey it enabled. The time traveler does not just visit the past. He voyages hundreds of thousands of years into the future, where he discovers a world that has diverged into two distinct species. The gentle, childlike Eloi live a life of leisure on the surface, while the monstrous, subterranean Morlocks toil in the darkness below. This was not a simple adventure. It was a devastating social commentary, a warning about the ultimate consequences of class division and industrial exploitation. Wells used time travel as the ultimate lens for social critique, asking what our present actions might cultivate in the distant soil of the future. Every time travel story that followed bears his imprint. The deliberate journey in a vehicle, the scientific rationale, the focus on the future's potential horrors, these are all Wellsian inventions. He established the central philosophical questions we still grapple with. Can we change the past, or are we merely fulfilling a predetermined destiny? Does knowledge of the future grant us power, or does it become a prison? When the time traveler helplessly watches his friend Weena swept away by the river, we feel the crushing weight of temporal helplessness. His story suggests that even with a machine to conquer time, we remain subject to the currents of cause and effect. Our modern obsession with time travel paradoxes, with altering history and saving loved ones, all flows directly from the narrative river that Wells first charted. His fiction did more than predict technological concepts. It shaped our very expectations, teaching us how to imagine the unimaginable. The machine he envisioned is now a permanent fixture in our cultural workshop, a tool we use not just to dream of other eras, but to better understand the profound depths and troubling directions of our own. H.G. Wells gave us the philosophical blueprint, but it was Albert Einstein who provided the mathematical foundation for the impossible. His theory of general relativity completely reshaped our understanding of the universe, revealing that space and time are not a fixed, rigid stage, but a single, flexible fabric called spacetime. This fabric can be warped and stretched by mass and energy, like a bowling ball sinking into a taut rubber sheet. And if spacetime is flexible, then the flow of time itself might be too. One of the most profound and experimentally verified consequences of this is time dilation. Imagine two identical twins. One remains on Earth, while the other embarks on a journey through space at a significant fraction of the speed of light. When the traveling twin returns, they would be younger than their Earth-bound sibling. This is not science fiction. It is a direct prediction of relativity, proven by comparing ultra-precise atomic clocks on airplanes with those on the ground. The faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. This effect is also amplified by gravity. A clock placed closer to a massive object like Earth will tick ever so slightly slower than a clock farther away. GPS satellites, for instance, must have their internal clocks constantly corrected for this very real time warp. Otherwise, your navigation app would lead you astray within minutes. These are tiny, everyday journeys into the future, But what about the far more dramatic leaps, the kind that would allow us to visit the age of the dinosaurs or see the distant stars? This is where the math gets truly strange, suggesting gateways hidden within the equations. One such gateway is the wormhole, often called an Einstein-Rosen bridge. Picture spacetime as a vast, flat piece of paper. To get from one side to the other, you would have to travel the long way across the entire sheet. But if you could fold the paper so the 2 points touch, a wormhole would be a tunnel or a shortcut punching directly through the fold, connecting two distant regions of spacetime in an instant. In theory, if such a structure could be stabilized, it might not just connect two places but 2 times. The entrance could be in your century, and the exit could open onto a prehistoric landscape. Yet, the universe seems to have built-in security measures. The known types of wormholes predicted by general relativity are incredibly unstable. They would collapse into a singularity, a point of infinite density, in a fraction of a second, long before even a single photon of light could pass through. To keep one open, you would need a form of matter with negative energy density, something with repulsive gravity to prop the throat of the wormhole apart. While quantum physics allows for tiny amounts of this exotic matter to exist, the quantities needed to stabilize a traversable wormhole are, for now, purely speculative. Another theoretical pathway is the closed time-like curve. This is a path through the twisted geometry of spacetime that loops back on itself, allowing an object to return to its own past without ever breaking the cosmic speed limit. You could follow this curve and, from your own perspective, simply be moving forward in time, only to end up at the moment you began your journey. Some solutions to Einstein's equations, like the one describing a rotating universe or the area around an infinitely long, dense cylinder, permit these bizarre loops. But do they exist in our reality? The energy and conditions required to create such a curve are so extreme and exotic that they push the boundaries of what we consider physically possible. So while Einstein's equations do not explicitly forbid a time machine, they do not make it easy. The theoretical permission slip is signed, but the practical hurdles are astronomical. The energy required is beyond anything our civilization could muster, perhaps equivalent to harnessing the entire output of a star. The physics suggests that time travel into the past might only be possible in regions of spacetime so severely warped that they are hidden behind the event horizons of black holes, places from which no information can ever escape. This leaves us with a tantalizing and humbling conclusion. The universe may permit time travel, but it seems to have engineered its laws to protect causality, to prevent paradoxes from unraveling the fabric of reality. The past might be a fortress, its walls guarded by the sheer, unimaginable energy required to breach them. The theoretical physics of Einstein suggests time travel might be locked away behind insurmountable cosmic barriers. But in the dark world of conspiracy, there are no such limits. From the ashes of the Philadelphia experiment, legend grew an even more sprawling and disturbing tale, a narrative that entangled government secrecy, psychological torture, and the forced creation of temporal doorways. This is the story of the Montauk Project, a legend that claims the United States military did not just teleport a ship, but perfected the art of manipulating time itself at a secret base on Long Island. The story goes that after the apparent failure of the Philadelphia experiment, the research was not abandoned. It was moved, refined, and expanded under the utmost secrecy at Camp Hero, a decommissioned Air Force base in Montauk, New York. The objective allegedly shifted from simple invisibility to something far more ambitious, opening stable portals to other times and dimensions. But to achieve this, the story claims the scientists needed a uniquely powerful tool, a human mind capable of focusing immense psychic energy to bend reality. The most shocking and ethically horrifying part of the legend involves the alleged methods used to create this tool. It is said that the project abducted young boys, often runaways or children from vulnerable backgrounds, and subjected them to brutal psychological conditioning. These children were strapped into a terrifying device known as the Montauk chair, a large, imposing seat wired with an array of electrodes and alien-looking technology. Through sensory deprivation, intense trauma, and powerful psychoactive drugs, their natural psychic abilities were supposedly amplified and weaponized. The most powerful of these psychics, a boy known only as Preston Nichols according to the law, could allegedly use the chair to manifest physical objects out of thin air or project his consciousness across time. The stories describe how the chair, linked to a massive transmitter, would tear open rips in the fabric of space-time. These were not gentle windows, but violent, unstable vortices. Through these portals, all manner of bizarre and terrifying entities are said to have entered our world. Accounts from those who claim to have been involved describe encountering insectoid aliens, shadowy figures, and amorphous, monstrous beings that stalk the corridors of the underground facility. The project, in its quest to master time, supposedly lost control, unleashing chaos from other dimensions into our own. This entire incredible saga was largely constructed from the claims of three men, Preston Nichols, Al Bielek, and Stuart Swerdlow, who came forward in the 1980s and 90s with detailed accounts of their supposed involvement. Their stories, filled with technical jargon and convoluted timelines, were compiled into a series of popular books that fused Cold War anxieties about mind control programs like MK Ultra with a burgeoning interest in UFOs and the paranormal. The Montauk Project legend represents the ultimate fusion of paranoid fears. It combines a deep suspicion of unchecked government power, the terror of losing one's mind and free will, and the existential dread of realities beyond our own being manipulated by shadowy forces. There is no physical evidence, no government documents, and no independent verification to support any of these claims. The entire narrative exists in the realm of testimony and speculation. Yet its power endures because it takes the scientific ambition of H.G. Wells and the military secrecy of the Philadelphia experiment to their most terrifying logical extreme. It is a story that suggests if time travel were ever truly achieved, it would not be discovered by a noble scientist in a lab, but weaponized in a hidden bunker, built upon a foundation of human suffering and unleashing horrors we were never meant to see. The story of the man from Tord finds a curious echo nearly 800 years earlier in the medieval English countryside. During the 12th century, in the village of Woolpit, villagers made a bizarre discovery. Two children, a boy and a girl, were found wandering near the wolf pits that gave the area its name. They were utterly terrified and spoke a language no one could recognize. But their most striking feature was their skin, which had a distinct green tint. After being taken in by the local lord, they eventually learned to eat beans and other local foods, and their green coloration slowly faded. The boy, sadly, grew sickly and died, but the girl adapted, learned English, and told an incredible story. She claimed she and her brother came from a land of perpetual twilight, a place she called St. Martin's Land, where all the people were green and the sun never shone. They had been herding their father's cattle when they heard a loud noise and suddenly found themselves in the Woolpit fields, blinded by our bright sun. Her account was recorded by two chroniclers of the era, leaving a historical puzzle that has never been fully solved. Was she from a hidden underground world, a different dimension, or simply a lost Flemish child? Her strange appearance caused by malnutrition and her unfamiliar language misinterpreted by superstitious locals. This ancient tale shares a core structure with the Tord story, a traveler from an impossible place, stranded in a world they cannot comprehend. Modern times have their own versions, often wrapped in the clinical language of amnesia. Cases periodically emerge of individuals found disoriented, with no memory of their identity, sometimes speaking in an unplaceable accent or displaying knowledge that seems out of sync with the present. Their stories, while usually explained by trauma or neurological conditions, often get reshaped by the public into potential time slip narratives. We are drawn to these stranger in a strange land accounts because they tap into a fundamental human anxiety, the fear of being completely and irrevocably lost. They are archetypal stories of identity stripped away, forcing us to wonder what defines us if not our history, our language, and our home. When a person appears with no verifiable past, our imagination rushes to fill the void. In a secular, scientifically minded age, we no longer readily believe in fairies or spirits from underground kingdoms, so we update the mythology. The green children become travelers from a parallel Earth. The amnesiac becomes a temporal refugee. The man from Tord becomes a casualty of a cosmic border crossing. These stories are so enduring because they are not really about the travelers themselves. They are about us. They act as a psychological safety valve, allowing us to explore our deepest fears of alienation and dislocation from the safety of our own familiar world. Every time we retell the tale of the man with the impossible passport or the children with green skin, we are quietly asking a question about the stability of our own reality and whether any of us are truly as rooted in our time and place as we believe. John Titter's story was not just a fleeting online rumor, it was a meticulously constructed world. He grounded his incredible claims in specific, technical details that gave his narrative a chilling sense of plausibility. At the heart of his mission was the time machine itself, a device he called the C-204. He described it as a gravity distortion unit powered by two miniature singularities. These micro-black holes, he claimed, were harnessed to warp the local fabric of space-time, creating a bubble that could move independently of the universe's normal flow. The entire apparatus was not housed in a gleaming metallic pod, but mounted in the back of a 1966 Chevrolet Corvette. This choice felt strangely authentic, a blend of high physics and mundane Americana that suggested a future where technology was retrofitted, not reinvented. His mission objective was equally precise. He said he was sent back to the year 2000 to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer. This was not for its processing power, but for a unique feature in its ROM, a hidden ability to debug legacy code from older IBM systems. In Titter's timeline, this specific machine was crucial for patching the crippling software in his era's archaic computer networks, systems that were failing in the aftermath of a global collapse. This detail was a masterstroke, as the IBM 5100 did possess a little-known emulation mode, a fact not widely understood by the public at the time. It was these small, verifiable crumbs of truth that made the larger fiction so compelling. Then there was the world he came from. He painted a picture of an America shattered by a second civil war, a conflict that would supposedly begin in 2004 over disputes about the presidential election. This war, he claimed, would escalate into a nuclear World War III by 2015, leaving the nation fractured and society in ruins. His timeline was one of extreme polarization, where distrust of the federal government was absolute and survival was a local affair. He described a world where the European Union had become a repressive superstate and where CERN research had inadvertently torn open gateways to other realities. The lasting impact of John Titter's narrative is undeniable. Long after his specific predictions failed to materialize, his story continued to resonate. He became a foundational figure in online conspiracy and science fiction communities, a benchmark against which all other internet mysteries are measured. His legacy is not one of accurate prophecy, but of cultural reflection. He appeared at a moment of technological transition when the internet was young and fears about Y2K and societal fragility were fresh. His story gave shape to those amorphous anxieties, providing a detailed, if fictional, roadmap for a future that many people felt was already beginning. He demonstrated the immense power of a well-told story to captivate and convince, proving that the most effective time traveler is not the one who predicts the future correctly, but the one who articulates the fears of the present with unnerving clarity. While we build machines to glimpse the past, a far older idea suggests the universe has already recorded it for us. This is the concept of the Akashic Records, a term drawn from Theosophy that imagines a cosmic library containing every thought, word, and event that has ever occurred. Think of it as the universe's ultimate DVR, a non-physical dimension where the entirety of human history and experience is permanently imprinted. It is not a history book, but a living, energetic field of information that some mystics and psychics claim they can access through deep meditation or altered states of consciousness. In this view, the past is not gone, it is simply stored, and the key to seeing it lies not in a vehicle, but in tuning one's own mind to the correct frequency. This mystical framework provides a fascinating lens through which to re-examine our technological time travel claims. Father Ernetti's Chronovisor, for instance, begins to sound less like a purely scientific instrument and more like a mechanical medium. He described his device as tuning into the residual energy of past events, pulling images and sounds from the ether. This is remarkably similar to the concept of reading the Akashic Records, only he proposed using cathode ray tubes and dials instead of spiritual focus. The Chronovisor was, in essence, a proposed technology for hacking the cosmic archive, a machine built to do what mystics have long claimed is possible through sheer force of will. The parallels do not end there. The time-slip experiences at Versailles and Bold Street could be interpreted not as literal journeys, but as moments where individuals accidentally tuned into a particularly potent recording within this field. The intense emotions of Marie Antoinette's final days or the daily life of a bustling Victorian street might have left a stronger imprint, a more accessible file in the cosmic database. When Moberly and Jourdain felt the air grow heavy and saw figures from another century, perhaps their minds unconsciously accessed that specific entry in the Akashic Records, projecting it around them with such vivid clarity that it felt utterly real. This bridging of ancient spirituality and modern ambition reveals a consistent human desire. We have always longed to witness the past, to learn its secrets and absolve its mysteries. For millennia, we sought this knowledge through prayer, ritual, and spiritual trance. Today, we seek it through physics, engineering, and technology. The goal is the same, only the proposed method has changed. The legend of the Akashic Records challenges the very nature of time, suggesting that the past, present, and future may all exist simultaneously in a vast, interconnected tapestry. Our linear experience of time, then, might just be the way we are programmed to read a single line of a much grander, multidimensional text. So the next time you hear a story of someone seeing a ghostly regiment on an old battlefield or feeling the palpable presence of a bygone era, consider this. They may not be seeing a ghost, and they may not have traveled through time. They might have simply stumbled upon a crack in their own perception, a fleeting moment where the universe's eternal recording briefly and unforgettably began to play. This paradox presents a universe where creation is an illusion. The bootstrap paradox is a thought experiment that unravels the very concept of origin. Imagine a young composer struggling to write their first symphony. One evening, a mysterious, weathered manuscript appears on their piano. It is a complete, breathtakingly beautiful symphony, signed with the composer's own name. Inspired and relieved, they copy the music and present it to the world, becoming an overnight sensation. Decades later, now an old and famous composer, they decide to send this very symphony back in time to their younger self, ensuring their own success. The music exists, it is real, but it has no true author. It was never actually composed by anyone. It is a closed loop, an idea that simply always was, with no point of origin. This is the bootstrap paradox in its purest form, a causal loop where an object or a piece of information is sent back in time, only to become the very cause of its own existence in the future. It creates something from nothing, defying the foundational principle that every effect must have a cause. The item, whether it is a physical object like a watch or abstract knowledge like a mathematical formula, has no discernible beginning. It just cycles through time, eternally self-created. This paradox strikes at the heart of our understanding of reality. We live in a world built on linear cause and effect. A seed causes a tree, a composer's effort causes a symphony, a discovery in a lab causes a new technology. The bootstrap paradox shatters this linearity. It suggests a universe where history can be its own author, where the future can write the past. This is not just a puzzle for physicists, it is a profound philosophical headache. It forces us to question what it means to create something. If you use future knowledge to invent a device in the past, who is the true inventor, the you who built it or the you who provided the blueprint? The paradox offers no satisfying answer, only an infinite regress of responsibility. It presents a reality where everything we think we know about beginnings and endings might just be a story we tell ourselves to make sense of a far more complex and mysterious cosmos. While the legend of the Philadelphia experiment was built on letters, it was given a voice through men who claimed to have lived it. Among the most prominent was a man named Al Bielek. His story went far beyond the ship's disappearance, evolving into an epic tale of being hurled through time itself. Bielek claimed he was aboard the USS Eldridge that fateful day in 1943, not as a simple sailor, but as a technician involved in the experiment. He said when the fields activated, he and his brother, Duncan Cameron, were thrown overboard, only to find themselves not in the water, but in a future underground military base in the year 1983. This was just the beginning of his journey. He described being deliberately sent further forward, to the years 2137 and 2749, and what he claimed to see there was a breathtaking and often terrifying vision of humanity's destiny. In 2137, Bielek described a world recovering from a series of catastrophic events. He said a second American Civil War had fractured the nation, and a pole shift had altered the planet's geography, submerging coastlines and reshaping continents. He claimed society was now managed by a computer-based government, a vast artificial intelligence that made all major decisions. The people, he said, were passive and docile, their lives completely managed by this system. It was a sterile, controlled existence, a far cry from the chaotic freedom of the 20th century. His account of 2749 was even more alien. He described a world where nation-states had completely dissolved, replaced by a single, global city-state system. Technology was so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic, with weather completely controlled and food synthesized from raw energy. But humanity had paid a price. He claimed people had developed psychic abilities as a matter of course, but had also lost much of their individual emotional drive, becoming almost like a collective consciousness. These claims are, by any objective measure, wildly outlandish. Bielek's story is riddled with inconsistencies and a complete lack of corroborating evidence. His own personal history was called into question, with researchers finding no military record placing him on the Eldridge. His detailed descriptions of future technology and society feel less like a genuine report and more like a patchwork of science fiction tropes, a narrative heavily influenced by the books and films of his own time. So why did his testimony and others like it capture such intense interest? The power lies in the raw force of first-hand account. When someone looks you in the eye and says, "I was there, I saw it," our brains are wired to lean in and listen. A personal story, no matter how dubious, carries an emotional weight that dry documents and official denials can never match. It transforms an abstract legend into a human experience. We are not just considering a theory about a ship, we are hearing a man's story of terror and wonder. This testimony fills the vacuum left by official secrecy. When the authorities say nothing happened, the human imagination demands an explanation, and a detailed, personal narrative satisfies that craving far more effectively than silence. Al-Bielek became a character in the very myth he helped to propagate, a living bridge between our world and the incredible. His account, however fictional, serves as a perfect vessel for our collective anxieties about government power, technological runaway, and the uncertain path that lies ahead. Deep in the remote Siberian wilderness, a catastrophe unfolded with the force of 1,000 Hiroshima bombs. On June 30th, 1908, a colossal fireball tore across the morning sky before a titanic explosion flattened over 800 square miles of forest. The Tunguska event remains the largest impact event in recorded history, yet no crater was ever found. The established scientific consensus points to the airburst of a stony meteoroid or comet fragment exploding miles above the ground, a natural event of staggering power. But the utter lack of any physical evidence from the object itself has fueled a far more speculative and thrilling idea. What if it was not a space rock at all, but a catastrophic failure of a machine not of this era? One persistent fringe theory suggests the Tunguska blast was the result of a failed time travel experiment. The logic, in its own strange way, follows a certain pattern. If someone from the future were attempting to open a portal or arrive in the past, the immense energies required could have destabilized and detonated upon arrival, resulting in the devastating explosion. The remote location and timing, just as the modern world was awakening to the possibilities of physics, makes it a perfect candidate for a test gone horribly wrong. An even more specific alternative explanation ties the event to one of history's greatest and most mysterious minds, Nikola Tesla. In the years leading up to Tunguska, Tesla was experimenting with the wireless transmission of massive amounts of energy. He claimed his Wardenclyffe Tower could send electrical power across the Atlantic, and he spoke of a terrifying particle beam weapon he called his Peace Ray. Could he have been testing this device, aiming a concentrated bolt of energy across the globe, only to miscalculate and strike Siberia by accident? The timeline is certainly provocative. The mystery of Tunguska endures precisely because science cannot provide a definitive, tangible answer. It is that gap in our knowledge, that void where a crater should be, that allows our imagination to rush in. We are drawn to these speculative explanations not because they are necessarily true, but because they transform a random act of nature into a story of human ambition, of brilliant minds pushing the boundaries of reality until those boundaries shattered, leaving only a silent, scorched forest as a warning. The universe might have a built-in escape clause for its most baffling riddles. While paradoxes threaten to tie time travel into logical knots, a radical interpretation of quantum physics offers a spectacular way out. This is the many worlds interpretation, a theory that suggests every possible outcome of every event actually happens, just in a different, newly created universe. Think of reality not as a single path, but as a tree that is constantly branching. Every choice you make, from what you eat for breakfast to the career you pursue, causes the cosmos to split. In one branch you had toast, in another you had cereal. Both versions of you are equally real, living their lives in parallel worlds that are forever separated. Now apply this breathtaking idea to time travel. The bootstrap paradox, where an object has no origin, becomes far less troubling. If a composer receives a symphony from their future self, that act of receiving it creates a new branch. In that new timeline, the symphony exists without a composer. But in the original timeline the traveler left, the symphony was never received, and the composer's life unfolded differently. The paradox is resolved because the loop does not exist within a single, linear history. It spans two distinct realities. Similarly, the classic grandfather paradox, where you go back and prevent your own birth, simply cannot happen in your original world. The moment you arrive in the past and take any action, you are no longer in your own history. You have stepped into a new branch, a parallel universe that is almost identical to yours up until the point of your arrival. In that new world, you might prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother. That version of you would never be born in that universe, but it has no effect on the you that already exists from the original timeline. You are a visitor, an external agent who has introduced a new variable, and the cosmos simply accommodates you by splitting off a new reality where your actions play out. This framework transforms time travel from a history-breaking act into a universe-hopping adventure. You are not rewriting a single book, you are pulling a new volume from an infinite library. The laws of cause and effect remain perfectly intact within each individual universe. The traveler does not create a logical inconsistency, they merely become the catalyst for a new, self-consistent timeline to be born. This is not just philosophical speculation, it is a direct consequence of the mathematics of quantum mechanics, a way to explain the bizarre behavior of particles without resorting to paradox. Of course, this theory comes with its own profound implications. If every possible past is real in some branch of the multiverse, then every potential future is already waiting. The power to choose becomes both monumental and strangely diluted. Your journey to the past would not correct mistakes in your own world. It would only launch you into a different one where those mistakes never occurred, leaving your original home untouched. The many worlds interpretation offers a cold, cosmic comfort. It saves logic at the expense of singularity, trading the cozy certainty of one history for the dizzying freedom of infinite ones. It suggests that every story we have explored, from the man from Tord to the chrononaut John Titor, could be a glimpse not into our past but into a neighboring reality, a world so close we can almost touch it, separated from us by the thinnest veil of probability. The dizzying possibilities of parallel universes emerge from the mathematics of quantum theory, but a tangible piece of this strange new physics may already exist in labs today. In 2016, the Nobel laureate Frank Wilczek proposed a seemingly impossible idea, a new phase of matter that defies one of nature's most fundamental symmetries. He called it a time crystal. You are familiar with the standard states of matter: solid, liquid, gas, and plasma. A time crystal adds a breathtaking new category to that list. It is a structure whose atoms are arranged not just in a repeating pattern in space, like the lattice of a diamond, but in a repeating pattern in time. Imagine a ring of atoms that, in its state of lowest possible energy, its ground state, does not simply sit still. Instead, it perpetually oscillates, ticking like a clock without ever being wound up or receiving any external push. This is not a machine. It is a material that, by its very nature, exhibits perpetual motion in its most stable form. The key to this bizarre behavior is the breaking of time translation symmetry. In our everyday experience, the laws of physics are the same at 10 o'clock as they are at 11 o'clock. Time is uniform. A time crystal shatters that uniformity. Its atomic structure evolves and returns to its original configuration at a fixed, regular interval, creating a preferred rhythm in time. It marks time in the same way a regular crystal marks space with a preferred, repeating pattern. Of course, this is not a time machine. You could not ride a time crystal back to the age of dinosaurs. Its motion is locked into a fixed, unchangeable cycle, a tiny, eternal heartbeat. But its very existence is revolutionary. For decades, physicists believed such a thing was thermodynamically impossible, a violation of the laws that govern energy. The creation of time crystals in laboratories, first with chains of charged atoms called ions, and later within the intricate lattices of diamonds, proves that our understanding of time was incomplete. It reveals that time itself can have a texture, a structure that can be manipulated and studied. The discovery keeps the dream of influencing time alive, not by building a machine, but by fundamentally expanding what we know is physically possible. It shows that time is not a featureless river flowing in one direction, but a medium with properties we are only beginning to comprehend. If matter can be engineered to tick forever in its ground state, what other profound manipulations of time might be waiting just beyond the next experiment. Our brains are not flawless archives of objective reality. They are masterful, if sometimes flawed, storytellers, constantly assembling our sense of the present from a swirl of sensory input, memory, and expectation. This delicate process can be disrupted, creating sensations so powerful they feel like evidence of another time. The odd familiarity of déjà vu, that sudden, unshakable feeling you have lived this exact moment before, is a common example. Its opposite, jamais vu, is equally strange, a fleeting moment where a familiar place or person feels utterly alien and new. These are not glimpses into parallel lives or past incarnations. They are neurological glitches, brief hiccups in the brain's memory recognition systems. For most, it is a passing curiosity, but for someone already steeped in the history of a place like Versailles or Bold Street, that sudden disorientation could be the catalyst, the first thread their mind pulls on to weave a full-blown time-slip narrative. Digging deeper reveals even more profound disruptions. Temporal lobe epilepsy, for instance, can produce intensely vivid and complex hallucinations. During a seizure or in the moments surrounding one, individuals might experience panoramic visions of detailed scenes, hear music or voices, or be flooded with overwhelming emotions and a powerful sense of presence, as if they are somewhere else entirely. These episodes are not mere daydreams. They are electrical storms in the brain regions responsible for memory and sensory integration, creating experiences that feel hyper-real. Imagine standing in a modern city street when such a wave hits, momentarily overlaying your perception with imagery drawn from deep memory or suggestion. The brain, desperate to make sense of the conflicting data, might construct a coherent story, one where you have not lost your bearings, but have instead literally traveled to a different era. Beyond clinical conditions, our innate desire for mystery and meaning plays a pivotal role. When we visit a historic site, we are often hoping to feel a connection to the past. This expectation primes our brain, making us more likely to interpret ambiguous sensations, a sudden chill, a peculiar play of light as something significant. Suggestion is a powerful collaborator. Hearing a famous story about time slips at a location before you visit can plant a seed, setting a mental template that your perception is all too eager to fill. When two people share such an expectation, as with Mobley and Jourdain, they can unconsciously cross-check and reinforce each other's impressions, building a shared reality that feels too consistent to be dismissed. The mind, in its quest for a good story and a break from the mundane, can become the most convincing time machine of all, crafting experiences that feel more real than reality itself. Our journey through these claims would be incomplete without confronting the role of outright fabrication. For every mysterious account, there is a deliberate hoax, a story crafted for profit, notoriety, or simply the thrill of the creative act. The Rudolph Fentz story is a perfect example, a work of short fiction that escaped its pages to become an urban legend. Its author, Jack Finney, never intended it to be taken as fact, yet the tale was so compelling it took on a life of its own. Similarly, the Andrew Carlssin stock market fable was pure invention by a satirical website, designed to exploit our anxieties about wealth and insider knowledge. These stories succeed because they give us exactly what we want, a simple, thrilling narrative that fits our preconceived notions of how a time traveler might appear. Beyond intentional lies, our own brains often conspire against us. We are pattern-seeking creatures, a trait known as pareidolia. This is why we see faces in clouds or hear hidden messages in recorded static. This same mental shortcut leads us to find time travelers in old photographs and films. The woman in the Charlie Chaplin footage is not holding a mobile phone. She is almost certainly using a portable hearing aid, a common device for the era. But our modern minds, conditioned by a world of constant communication, instantly project our own reality onto her ambiguous gesture. We see what we expect to see, not what is actually there. This tendency is then amplified exponentially by the media ecosystem. A sensational story about a man from the future arrested for insider trading generates far more clicks and newspaper sales than a dull correction stating it was all a fake. The economics of attention reward the spectacular, not the factual. An uncritical news cycle picks up a viral story, plastering it across headlines without the basic scrutiny of checking for police reports or official records. By the time the truth emerges, the myth has already sunk its roots deep into public consciousness, becoming a permanent part of the digital folklore. The next time you encounter a story that seems to defy time itself, pause for a moment. Ask a simple question. Is this a mystery waiting to be solved, or is it a mirror reflecting our own desires back at us, distorted by hoaxers and magnified by a media machine that thrives on wonder? We are not just entertained by these stories, we are haunted by them. This deep and enduring obsession with time travel is less about the mechanics of a machine and more about the deepest yearnings of the human heart. It is a fantasy born from our most profound regrets. Who among us has not lain awake at night, replaying a single moment, wishing with every fiber of our being that we could go back and change one decision? The cruel finality of the past is one of life's heaviest burdens. Time travel offers the ultimate escape from that weight, a promise that our worst mistakes are not carved in stone, that a second chance is not just a hope but a theoretical possibility. It transforms regret from a permanent scar into a problem waiting for a solution. This longing to correct our personal history is powerfully mirrored in our collective curiosity about the grand stage of the past. We stand before the pyramids or read about the lost library of Alexandria, and we are tormented by questions. What did a Roman marketplace truly sound and smell like? What wisdom was lost to the flames? We are a species desperate for context, for connection to the narrative that led to us. The ability to witness history firsthand is the ultimate answer to that thirst, a chance to stop being students of the past and become its silent witnesses, to finally know what really happened. Beyond regret and curiosity, these stories are a quiet rebellion against our own mortality. Time is the one force that moves in only one direction for us all, an unstoppable current sweeping us from birth to death. The time traveler, however, stands outside that current. They are the ultimate survivor, the one who can cheat the system, visiting epochs long before they were born and seeing worlds that will exist long after they are gone. It is a fantasy of transcendence, a way to imagine that the boundaries of a single human lifespan are not absolute. This brings us to the most profound philosophical battleground that time travel creates, the conflict between free will and determinism. If you could travel to the past, could you truly change it? Or are your actions, including your decision to travel back, already a part of a fixed and unchangeable timeline? This question strikes at the very core of our existence. Do we truly author our lives, or are we merely reading lines from a script written by fate? Our movies and books constantly wrestle with this tension. One story shows a character accidentally causing the very disaster they hope to prevent, a nightmare of predestination. Another narrative allows them to return and create a better future, a triumphant celebration of free will. We consume these stories because they are safe arenas to confront a terrifying question: are we truly free? This is why time travel is not a niche genre, but a fundamental human what-if scenario. It is the ultimate thought experiment, a tool we use to explore the weight of our choices, the hunger for knowledge, the fear of death, and the very nature of our own agency. Every time we lose ourselves in a story about a journey through time, we are not just seeking adventure. We are asking, in 1,000 different ways, what it means to be human in a universe that seems to be governed by a clock we cannot rewind. From haunted French gardens to internet prophets, we have wandered through a labyrinth of human imagination. We stood with two women in the silent gardens of Versailles and watched a man vanish from a guarded hotel room. We witnessed a warship flicker out of existence and listened to a soldier from a future civil war. each story a captivating echo in the long corridor of history. Yet, despite the chilling details and heartfelt testimonies, not a single one of these claims has ever produced the one thing that science demands: verifiable proof. No time machine has been displayed in a museum, no passport from Tord rests in an evidence locker. These legends remain exactly that: powerful stories, not documented facts. But their persistence tells us something far more important than whether time travel is possible. It reveals the incredible depth of our desire to conquer time itself. We are a species haunted by regret, driven by curiosity, and rebellious in the face of our own mortality. These stories are the monuments we build to that struggle. They are the evidence not of physics, but of the human spirit's refusal to be bound by a single timeline. So we leave you with one final question, a thought experiment that is yours to conduct. If you had a time machine, where or when would you go first? Let us know in the comments below, and do not forget to subscribe for more explorations into history's greatest mysteries.